Welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while since I've done any kind of recording, but I did hit the 50 book mark. I went actually over that 76 to be honest. And what this video is it's actually going to be my top 10 of books that I've read this year. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and I'll answer the questions for you. I read a lot of Magic the Gathering books. And I was actually surprised that not more of those made it on to this list, but I guess that just shows that the standalones kind of weren't too bad. But here versus the 2024 year in books, so according at least to Goodreads, 76 books read, about 25,000 pages read. The shortest book was a book called The Woman Who Lives in the Earth. It was 171 pages. It was kind of like a fantasy philosophy kind of book, pretty short, pretty straight to the point, pretty deep at times, actually. And then the longest book was Dean Koontz's Strangers at 681 pages. That was a lengthy one, and it took a long time to kind of slow through that one. But average book length was 326 pages. The most shelved was The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, and the least shelved was a Magic the Gathering book called Yedit, which only had 2. So that one really didn't have a whole lot to it in terms of like popularity or any of that. So now we'll get into the top 10 here, the 76 books that I read. Number 10 is Stephen King's Firestarter. I've read this before, actually. This is I think my second or third time reading, and I've seen the movie with Drew Barrymore, great movie, but it's also a great story. The characters, I think Stephen King, I'm not a huge Stephen King fan, but this is one that definitely stands out for me, and one that I can, probably read again, though not anytime soon, but it's one that I could read, I could find myself reading again. So that was number 10, Stephen King's Firestarter. Number 9 is the one that I actually finished today, edited by Stephen E. Witcher. It's selections from Ralph Waldo Emerson. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of in the blackish. But anyway, it's an old book. It was $1.35 back when it came out, and I don't think you'll ever find new books again for $1.35. But really, I mean, for what this is, as a philosophy book, and between his journals and his essays and then poetry, I think this is probably the best of the selection books out there for him. So that was number 9. I just finished that one today, or today, New Year's Eve. Number 8 was Peter Archer as the editor for Magic the Gathering: Wrath and Storm. It was an anthology, so it wasn't part of any series, but it went along with the whole Wrath the Wrath plane thing within Magic. So it was still with the Phyrexians, and you still had Urza going around as a planeswalker, and he had the crystal eyes, and Gerard was him and his legacy that were supposed to be the Phyrexians. What I liked about Wrath and Storm, even though it was written by all different authors, was that each story pertained to that universe, but it was from a different character's perspective. And I really, really liked that. I liked how they did that. It gives you a little bit of insight more into each character. And I think, more of the Magic books could have been that way, more as a narrative. Maybe. I think they would have been better overall. Number 7 was by Clayton Emery, another Magic the Gathering book called Shattered Chains. It was a pre-cycle book, so it was before Wizards of the Coast actually did the publishing themselves. And this has to do with the evil city and the evil cartel that was around. And one of the characters he has is really cool. It's not really magic, but he can make his hands turn into chains and just like throw them out at you and can impale you and do all different sorts of things. So that one was cool too. It was kind of creative, I thought, from that perspective. Number 6, another Magic the Gathering book by Jeff Grubb, The Brothers' War. This one had to actually be on there because when I started playing Magic, this was the thing that was big. Urza's Destiny, the Brothers' War was big, Phyrexians, the Thran, all of that stuff was all really part of the big push when I started playing the Magic the Gathering game, the card game. So obviously when you go to the books, you start kind of there, even though there's one that you do before the Brothers' War. That's not the first book that you do. But it tells on how, basically they dug up Dominaria and just were trying to make artifact after artifact after artifact and using thousands of Thran power stones. And little tidbits coming into how the Phyrexians actually show up in here. I'm not going to tell you how in case you decide to read it yourself. But it's a good book. And Jeff Grubb was one of the better Magic the Gathering authors. Number 5 was a bit different. It was actually a book that I got from my son a while back, but by Keith Gave, called The Russian Five. Now, if you don't know the Russian Five, it goes back to hockey, the Detroit Red Wings, when for the first time in NHL history, you had a 5-man Russian unit. So at center, you had Igor Larionov. At one of the wings, you had Sergei Fedorov. At the other wing, you had Slava Kozlov. Defense was Slava Fetisov, and the other defenseman was Vladimir Konstantinov, who unfortunately, after winning the first cup, was in a limo accident and basically had a massive brain injury, was never going to ever play again. And it was such a shame because he was one of those guys that you would talk to other players and they were like, you'd love to have him on your team, but you hate to play against him. But actually, the way that this book is, this was still during the time when there wasn't really the Cold War, but these guys were coming out of the Soviet Red Army, and obviously there was still communism was still kind of there. It didn't break down yet, and it was how the Detroit Red Wings maneuvered and kind of tricked out the Russian Federation into getting these players and signing them to NHL deals. And it's real interesting. It's a little bit of cloak and dagger, but it's actually it's real. It happened. So I would say check that one out too. That was number 5. Number 4, Dean Koontz, Strange Highways, which is a collection of 2 novellas and 12 short stories. This book basically made it in for the 2 that book ended, the 2 novellas. Strange Highways is a nice little time traveler piece, and the last story, Chase, was just I think one of Dean Koontz's best stories. It may have not been novel length, but it's one of his best stories. Servants of Twilight I read long ago. It was the first one I read by him, and that was years ago. That was a great story. Chase, the last one in Strange Highways, is up there, so that's number 4. Number 3, H.G. Wells, which was the one that was the most shelved, War of the Worlds. Classic science fiction. The Mars are landing, the Martians are landing, and it's slower than what I remembered it being, and remembering the Orson Welles radio play, the book kind of moves a lot slower than that. It's very much a narrative from the human perspective, but all-time classic, one that if you're a sci-fi fan, you got to read. Number 2, one that I didn't even know that I had and was one of the highest rated on Goodreads, James Herbert's The Dark. This book was a lot around the occult, um, the mediums and psychics and psychic energy that is out there. Not a long book, maybe around 300 pages, but it was one of those books that it's interesting because it starts off as a narrative, and then it kicks into third person, and then it ends as a narrative. And I've never really read one like that before, but it was a really good story. It was on the dark side, which I kind of like the dark side, but it was a good book. So I would recommend checking that one out. That was number 2 on my list. And number 1 was J. Robert King's The Thran, Magic the Gathering. This was the prequel to the Brothers of War, and it all starts here with Yawgmoth and how he, brings himself in with the Thran, and how the Thran are building these great cities. These great cities using Thran power stones. And Yawgmoth, who at the time of the beginning of the book is basically outcast, but he comes back. He's a physician, a doctor, and it's his way of how he rises within the culture, and basically how the Phyrexians begin. It's a dark story, kind of graphic, probably the most graphic of any of the Magic the Gathering ones that I've come across. But that was number 1. One that if you're gonna read the Magic the Gathering books, that's the one to start with. Not easy to find, but if you can get it and read it, it's a good one. So that's gonna wrap it up. That was my 2024 year in review. 2025 is coming up, and I'm gonna lay out the goals and objectives for that one coming up in another video. But again, if you have any questions about the top 10, the books that I mentioned, leave a comment down below. As always, please please subscribe. It helps me out. Post a note, click the bell to get notifications for when new videos come up, because I will be posting a whole lot more. So until next time, God bless, and let's keep YouTube liberty.